All right, it's time for world politics. We'll see what's happening in the world of the political landscape and all along those lines and see what folks have got to say about a number of these stories that are taking place and what's going on in the political landscape. Because, like I said, there's a lot going on, whether it is things taking place on the weather wise, because we're having some rain here in this area, or whether it's things going on in DC, or whether it's a number of other things that are going on as well. So, like I said, a lot's happening on the political landscape. I know I've got Rick with me, and of course, we'll have the lawyers Den later on today talking about habeas corpus and other things along those lines. I think that's slated for 6 o'clock, but it is time for world politics. I'll bring in Rick, see what he's got going on, and see what he's hearing about the political landscape and what the latest things that are going on in the Trump world. Because we know Trump's got amazing things that are happening on a regular basis and all along those lines. So it's always fascinating to see what people's thoughts are about a number of the things taking place in the world and what the latest insanity is, whether it's here, whether it's in Liberia, whether it's in Russia, whether it's in the Japan or a number of other places around the world. So we do know that madness happens all over the world. As a matter of fact, Rick has had the pleasure of traveling the world because he had to go not that long ago to see his daughter, who was at that time, I think, living in England, and definitely they probably traveled to other places as well. Rick, what's one of the things I've got to do better at? Because as a person, and I think I said this on this show before, I've only traveled twice around the world, and that was once when I was a kid. My dad was stationed in the Air Force. I was literally an infant, and I went to Turkey. I guess I must have moved there when I was about 3 or 4 months old to about 3 years old, and everything like that. So, those early years, and I understand from my mom and others that there were people that were definitely, doing what they do with babies, which is doting over them. And this would have been in the 60s and all along those lines. And then I went on one cruise right before the pandemic and everything like that. And took me to the U.S. Virgin Islands, Grand Turks, Puerto Rico, and trying to think if there was. Oh, we're supposed to go to the island because every cruise line has its own island, but unfortunately, that particular one there was heavy rain, so we did not get a chance to make it because they got to get on those boats in order to do that. So I guess technically Grand Turks might be a U.S. a non U.S. territory and everything like that. I do know the U.S. Virgin Islands is just that. It's U.S. and Puerto Rico is a territory. So I guess technically Grand Turks would count as a overseas trip, even though it was the only one that I've done. And speaking of stuff going on, Trump is warning Putin that he is playing with fire after declaring that the Russian president has gone absolutely crazy. So this from somebody that I think they used to be having this bromance and everything, but apparently the bromance is over because he is saying that Putin is playing with fire as he again lashes out at the Kremlin leader after the Kremlin leader bombed parts of Ukraine again. So he's definitely yelling at different people, whether it's the Russian president or the folks at
I
Harvard.
don't think it's dissuading Putin. Putin has stepped up his war efforts, so Putin is not intimidated. So if you're going to travel, I don't know. You might want to stay in the U.S. for now. In that you could probably get some incredible travel bargains this summer because U.S. policies have scared away a ton, like 20% of foreign tourists. So
Mhm.
America's biggest, tourist destinations are probably hurting and probably have some great deals.
I would think they got some great deals. Speaking of Trump, apparently Trump intends to cancel all federal funds directed at Harvard. So Trump is ending federal contracts with Harvard University. So, and the Harvard president speaks out against Trump, and definitely they're having an analysis of their DEI job losses. So apparently Trump's not a fan of Ivy League colleges either. And King Charles the Third says Canada facing unprecedented challenges as Trump threatens annexation. So he's definitely making some interesting enemies. And Trump's team pauses new student visa interviews as it weighs expanding its social media vetting. So they're going to figure out a way that they can vet your social media accounts. And correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't one of the biggest people in social media started because of college kids? Because I think Facebook, if I
Yeah,
remember, its
Facebook was
timeline was started by folks that wanted to have a
right.
voice in their own social media.
Well, you can watch the movie, The Social Medium, and it's yeah, Mark Zuckerberg started Facebook or kind of half stole Facebook from other people as a way to rank the hotness of Harvard female Harvard students. Not that he had a shot with any of them because he was kind of creepy. Um,
Yeah.
but okay, so the deal is that I guess the to get a visa to come study in the U.S., I guess you have to be interviewed by, I don't know, border security, immigration, naturalization. Anyway, some U.S. personnel. You have to sit down with somebody, or I don't know, Zoom with somebody, and to make sure you're not, like dangerous, or I don't know what the deal is, but I haven't had to go through that. But they're stopping doing these interviews until they can set up a system where, as part of your admission to the U.S., they're going to look through all your old Insta posts and TikTok posts and Twitter and see if you ever like said anything bad about Trump or anything. And then you're screwed. You can't come here to study, which is
Well, that's horrible, but we've got another person who's going to join us. I'm glad he was able to make it, and he's running for office here in North Carolina and everything. But Steve Rao has joined us. We were talking about some of the different folks that Trump is going after, whether it's Canada or whether it's Harvard or whether it's Putin now, because apparently him and Putin are not friends and everything. So, what are you hearing on the campaign trail, and what have you got in your mind? I did know, and we must give a lot of times there is sadness in sports events, and Liverpool, there was this major incident, and I mentioned it on the news earlier today, where there was a car that plowed into the Liverpool crowd, and of course they're very big into their soccer, and it was the Liverpool FC parade car crash, and there was several casualties. So our sympathies do go out for those that lost their lives in that particular attack. So, but Steve, I'll turn it over to you. What you got going on?
Well, I'm about to walk into a council meeting, but I mean, yeah, what I'm hearing, let me just pull my notes. So what I'm hearing is basically the Kremlin did discuss President Trump's emotional reactions after he called Putin crazy for bombarding Ukrainian cities over the weekend. So obviously the relationship seems strained. The Chancellor of Germany said that restrictions on how far Ukraine could fire the missiles have been scrapped, and Ukraine has been forbidden from using some of its long-range weapons. So we're seeing a lot of inconsistency in foreign policy. Consumer prices are rising around the world. The impact of tariffs, I think, is something that is is looking like it's hurting the economy short term. And all of this while Democrats are looking for how do they get through the noise with getting some seats back in the House and Senate, and then all eyes on the presidency in 2028, even though it's a bit early. I've been hearing Andy Bashir from Kentucky probably is going to run. I think he's got a great chance because he's in a red state where he's won twice. He's a young guy. I don't think Kamala Harris should run. I don't think Wes Moore might be a candidate, but I think it's got to be some in the urban area. But I think the Democrats have to get back on message, and that's all I'm hearing out here. And in North Carolina, just same old Mark. I mean, people are wanting to change the Democratic governor, Republican legislature. You know the drill.
Yep. How is that going with Josh? How is that going with Josh Stein and
Liverpool? Nobody killed, 65 injured. Maybe not political. Driver thought to be on drugs. So
yeah, we prayed for Liverpool. I'm glad no one was injured. Sorry.
Nobody's killed. So glad you correct me on that and everything along those lines. So that is some great news in that sense. Hey, Steve, one of the things that's going on, and I know you might have some thoughts around this because it does impact North Carolina politics, but Trump has asked the Supreme Court to make it easier to deport migrants to South Sudan and other places like that. So what is your take on this notion of the Trump administration and what they're doing with the migrant deportation cases? Because Trump asked the U.S. Supreme Court to intervene in deportation to third countries. So I guess they're trying to send them to countries that they might not even be from and everything. So what is your take on that?
Question mark?
Yeah, I'll just ask you your take or what you're hearing in the streets, Steve, about the deportation of various folks that to countries, some that are their home countries and some that are not their home countries.
Well, this happened in North Carolina. We did see this happening with, you know, Indians who are here illegally coming into the homes of where they work, affecting local Indian restaurants, which was interesting. Very surprising that this happened. So, you know, people are concerned. I haven't really heard. We do know that ICE does make visits down here, and it's now in the law of North Carolina that you would have to work with ICE if you're a sheriff. Where when you know, before when Biden was president, that was scrapped, and but the legislature passed that. I think it's Senate Bill 382 right here. So, Mark, I mean, I think this is something more we're going to see. The irony is that the more and more we focus on deportation and illegal immigrants, I think we lose the fact of streamlining our immigration system and having a system that's encouraging the best and brightest to come here. We have a lot of good legal immigrants, many from India, many from South Asia that are here, but it looks like we're getting farther and farther away from that. And as long as there's illegal immigrants, I think immigration is going to be a bad word, particularly for Republicans, and I think it's just hard for anyone to work together. But North Carolina is the 8th largest state in the union, and we are seeing this on the ground. CNN reached out to me to talk about this, and then I never heard back from them. But at least they reached out. So
they did reach out to you, and that's a good thing, showing that you are getting some reputation and some notoriety in even the national scene and all along those lines. I know. What is your assessment, just really quickly, of Josh Stein in his early days? He's only been governor for a while, and I know he's had to deal with stuff, including the folks in the mountains, and they're trying to get aid and everything. But what is your assessment? I also know he's been doing some work with different companies. We just recently saw that Wolfspeed, which used to be called Cree, is going to be going bankrupt and possibly, I guess, maybe eventually closing their operation, which definitely hurt the state and everything. But what are you hearing about or your thoughts around Josh Stein in his early days?
Well, I think that the governor is he's a very smart guy. Definitely, I think the rising star, very calm at the wheel, and he is a very confident in himself. He has a good relationship with the Democrats and many Republicans because he was a senator and the attorney general. He must be a good poker player. You never know what he's thinking. I think it's been hard for him that, you know, he hasn't been able to get the kind of aid from the federal government, Western North Carolina. He does believe that North Carolina is on a fiscal cliff, and so he's concerned about our economic certainty moving forward. One of the things I think the governor is going to be dealing with is, you know, the economic development of the state. We give these big incentives. Cree or Wolfspeed was supposed to expand, and they didn't. Infosys pulled out of a deal, $22.4 million of incentives. VinFast not making any announcements. Apple as well, $84 million of incentives. And none of these companies are meeting their performance targets because they're not going back to work. So I think this is a question all around North Carolina is, do we invest some of the small businesses? Do we provide venture capital to get that going? Because, you know, it's, I mean, do we provide incentives based on job growth? Because this is a factor, and I know the governor's dealing with that. So it's going to be interesting to see how Wolfspeed's retraction or bankruptcy will affect the Triangle, but it's a major employer. And while we're saying all this, we have a lot of job cuts, 800 jobs being lost at FHI 360, RTI International, federal jobs. And so, you know, people are paying more money. There are less jobs. Sounds like a recession to me. And, you know, I think I'll be back on Thursday to speak a little bit more, but, and then next week's going to be a good week for me as we close to the summer. I'm going to take a little time to do more media with you guys, but, yeah, it's an exciting time in North Carolina. And John, it's great to see you, sir. I'd like to see John's opinion.
Yeah, John's joined us. He's from Canada and everything along those lines. Hey, John, just really quickly, I don't think I've ever asked you this, and I'm not sure what your job field is and all along those lines, but how much work is going in terms of still people wanting to work from home in Canada as opposed to working in the office? Because that has been a major issue here and everything. I know that one of my jobs is still very much a remote job, where it used to be an job that you would come into the office. But how is what Steve is talking about, that whole notion of remote work playing out even in Canada in this day and time? Are more and more people going back to their regular works, or are there still a lot of people that are still doing work from the remote area? And what is your take on that?
Yeah, so since COVID, I'm now retired, just over a month. But before that, I was in IT for 40 plus years. COVID hit, and most of us went remote, especially in the IT field. We could do that. My wife is also in IT, and she goes into her office a couple times a week. So it's kind of hybrid for the type of work that she does, and especially office based. That seems to be the norm.
Walker, well, I'll see you next week. I head to a council meeting, but it's great seeing everybody.
Nice
John, I
to see
look
you.
forward to it. Thank you. I'll be back.
Good seeing you
next
too,
week.
and everything. So we'll
All
see
right,
you hopefully later on in the week, definitely next week, and everything like that. Always good when you're able to pop in and everything. This is for
Okay.
both.
Wait. Let me do a topic for a second here.
Yeah,
So,
go for it. I was going to give you another topic, but go
all
for
right,
it.
okay, Trump, he says a lot of things that indicates that, he doesn't care about certain groups of people. He's said that, veterans are and the war dead are losers and suckers, and he's having Doge and the Republicans are reducing Social Security and Medicare benefits if that bill manages to make it through the Senate. So I want to talk about deaths in America every year.
Mhm.
Every year we lose about 1%, a little less than 1% of the population, which makes sense because, people live 80 years. So we're going to lose, so the number of deaths went from 1.5 million in 1960 to 2.8 million in 2019, just gradually increasing along with the size of our population, but increasing less, as a proportion of the population because medicine got better. And then we had the most horrible year in US history where the number of deaths in 2020 jumped from 2.8 in 2019 to 3.5 million, jumped nearly 25% because of COVID in 2020, went up a little bit higher in 2021. We're still above the long-term average in 2022, and then in 2020, in the last 3 years, it's calmed down. But we'll see if the changes made under Trump will increase the death rate in the U.S. Under Trump, 1 million more Americans died in 4 years under him than under any previous president. And only a third of that was due to increases in population. Then Biden, I think, probably beat him because he had 2 bad COVID years until COVID calmed down. So we'll see what Trump's latest legislation will do to death rates in the U.S.
And that actually plays into the other topic that I was going to bring up, but it actually comes from France, since we are world politics and everything. But apparently France's National Assembly voted in favor of legalizing assisted dying. So French MPs backed law to allow assisted dying. And I know that was a whole controversy way back in the U.S. I think it was Dr. Kevorkian. I know it began with Kevorkian. Thank you.
Dr. Kevorkian.
Yes, and all along those lines. But what is our thoughts around this notion of assisted dying, or assisted, some people call it, assisted dying. So what is our thoughts around this? I'll start with you, John, but definitely love to hear from Rick as well. But what are your thoughts? Is this something that needs to be more acceptable in the world or less acceptable? Because apparently the French MPs are back in law to allow assisted dying.
Canada has that. I worked with a guy who was diagnosed with a terminal disease, Lou Gehrig's disease.
Right.
And he progressively got worse. And he basically told his family a number of months before him deciding to basically die. And he contacted his doctors. Doctors assisted him. So I think that was now, I guess, a couple summers ago. So he chose a day. It was a Friday summer day, and he went in and had it done. So
Yeah.
he didn't want
What's
to
your
go through any pain, any suffering, and so I saw it as a good thing.
So 11 states plus the District of Columbia allow assisted dying in the U.S., where if you're in bad shape, you don't like the life you're living with some terminal disease, you can ask to end it. Yeah,
And it's not a willy-nilly thing. The doctors just don't do this to
right.
any person on the street.
If the law is written
reasons.
correctly, I don't know if any states have badly written laws that allow idiots to just do it as kind of a suicide stunt. I doubt it, but yeah, but if it's reasonably controlled.
Yeah, that makes sense and everything, but yeah, I think that I'd be in favor with that and all along those lines. But yeah, it has been an interesting issue that a lot of people have been thinking about, and all along those lines. Since it is world politics, and since I know that one of our other shows talks about Russia, Ukraine, and also China, and there are some folks that are concerned about the safety of some of our chemical plants. I mean, we've had incidences here in the United States. 3 Mile Island comes to mind, and definitely Michigan and its water come to mind as well. But apparently in eastern China, there was a China chemical plant explosion that left at least 5 dead and 19 injured in a chemical plant explosion. So I'm just wondering, is that an issue in Canada, and how concerned do you think people should be if they are living near chemical plants? Because I know, like, even here in North Carolina, there are some nuclear reactors that are not that far from the heart of the city. I think Sharon Harris might be not that far from our state capital and everything along those lines. But how concerned do you think people should be? And I don't know where you are totally in Canada and everything, but do you hear a lot of people that are concerned about the safety of these plants being near them, whether they're nuclear plants or whether they're chemical plants or whatever the kind of plants are? So I'll start with you, John, but I know there have been incidences in California as well.
Not at all. We're not far from Darlington nuclear plant that's been operational, I'm going to say about at least 35 years, maybe 45 years, maybe even 50 years. So it's in the east end of Toronto. I'm in the west end. No concerns.
Canada's set up to Canada's got more land area, I think, than any other country in the world, but only 40 million people. So, Canada's set up for, if you want to mess around with dangerous stuff, there's plenty of open space where you won't kill anybody except maybe a couple workers. You guys have oil sands and a lot of refining of oil sands, and there's a great book by Kate Beaton, a graphic novel that is about what it's like to work at an oil sands refinery in Canada. And it sounds like brutal work. And it's like, so, we have brutal industries here too.
Yep. What's your take on that?
I'm more curious as to, in terms of politics, how you get convinced one half of your population to steer away or pivot away from Trumpism. That's my number.
So I want to talk about that, because in 2024, there were close to 30 national elections in countries around the world, and in 82% of them, the right-wingers won or made significant advances. So far this year, the left-wingers have been doing better in, 4 or 5 national elections so far this year. And people think it's because of the bad examples set by the people who won last year. But my question is, does it even matter who's in charge, whether it's conservatives or liberals? Because in 10 years, AI is going to be in charge. I had Scott was on our show a couple nights ago, and last night I was talking with Scott, and he said, what weapons do you think AI will come up with when it has more agency, where it's more able to do things on its own? And I mentioned the standard stuff like those dog robots out of Boston Dynamics that look super scary, and the dancing, human robots, but that's an easy call, killer robots. But I think the most powerful weapon AI will have will be propagandizing and in people influencing their thinking. And I think 2016, when Trump won, was the first AI election, because propaganda disseminated along with information harvesting flipped a ton of people. And now in the US, with we have, I don't know, 20-25% of adults who kind of don't believe in reality, based on what social media and what news they consume. And it's a huge problem, and it's not going away.
Yep. What's your take on
I agree.
that?
That's my concern as well. Absolutely. So social media, AI being used in a way that manipulates people's news feeds.
So I guess the people who run the AI companies are always testing the AI to see what it's capable of. And I think it was Claude AI. Claude's the one I use. I like Claude. I talk to Claude. These AIs, if you haven't used them, you can go online, you can talk to them, you can ask them questions, you can ask for help with research.
I use it all the time. Posts that Nikki puts up on his, I use it all the time and just throw back.
And
the disinformation and misinformation is, especially someone like Nick. Again, it just blows me away. Putting out claims and posts that are so obviously not true, and I don't know if he does it for entertainment or if it boggles my mind. In any case, in the chat, I put a book I read about 6 months ago. Fantastic book, The Coming Wave, AI.
Yeah, but they're super friendly. I love talking with Claude. Claude is super friendly, very helpful. I'm writing a novel, and I'm like, Claude, tell me, make up some, give me 10 names of musicians who might be popular in the year 2035. And Claude instantly makes up a bunch of names, and they're all really good. And Claude has thought about stuff that I haven't. That a couple of them are Indian names, because India is going to, a big part of the entertainment world. And Claude's always flattering. You tell Claude something, he goes, "Oh, that's a great idea. And what about this?" So they instantly become your friend, the AIs. However, Claude they test these AIs to see if they're going to get up to no good. And they threw a test to Claude where they said, this guy is in charge of whether you get to continue operating. And in a data set that Claude had access to, they put in a bunch of fake emails showing that this guy was having an extramarital affair. And this guy says to Claude, "Sorry, Claude, we have to shut you down for good." And Claude says, "Yeah, if you do that, I'm going to let the world know that you're screwing around on your wife." It was all fake. Claude wasn't going to get shut down. And, the guy wasn't having an affair, but they were going to see what Claude did. And Claude, acted in its own interest in a not good way. Yeah. Sorry, my wife asked if I fed the dogs.
Yeah. Did you feed the dog?
I fed the dog.
I was going to say the book that I just mentioned, it talks about the evils and the good, types of applications it can be used for. Governments will use it in a way, and they've already started doing that. That might not be in our best interest. So it's going to be interesting. The one thing with Doge that I found out is that they've got now this kind of database. They've accumulated all this data, personal data that they're going to feed into, a database and use it. That's in some way using AI.
Yeah, we used to worry in the U.S. that the FBI had a file on you. Now, all sorts of companies have all sorts of files on everybody, consisting of anything you've posted online. So, yeah, you mentioned earlier in the show that, I came back from England, and
Right.
I like England. It's I don't probably go to the worst parts of England, but the parts we went to, it's very melting potty. There's a lot of, you see people of all races and religions, and nobody seems to be, sending off a hostile vibe, at least where I was. And you look at it now, some people are worried that Muslims are going to take over England. Muslims are 6% of the population. This is like conservatives freak out about Muslims because Muslims statistically tend to have more kids than frickin' Christians. And they've done surveys in England, and so 6% of England is Muslim, and 6% of Muslims don't care about British values. 94% of Muslims support British culture and values. So 6% of 6% don't. And I got to say, if you're worried about that the 6% is 6%, and you're worried that Muslims are going to have, that after 8 generations there might be, England might be 20% Muslim because they have more kids, then I got to say you're an idiot, because there's a thing called the San Francisco Consensus, where it might be in the book you just mentioned, where the top minds in AI, and they all live and work around, in the San Francisco area, have concluded that the combined brain power of all the AIs in the world will exceed the combined brain power of all humanity by about the year 2031. So, so Muslims might double as a percentage of the population in England, maybe in 60 years. But AI is here to manipulate us in 6 years.
I'm in Toronto. We have a huge melting pot, no issues. Everybody gets along. Yeah, there, some people on the right, conservatives, kind of worry and talk about the immigrants and brown people, not as bad as down in your neck of the woods. It's a much smaller percentage of our community. Canada is based on immigration, always has been, always will be. My parents came from Europe in the 50s. I welcome, Canada welcomed my parents. Bring them on in, no problem. We need them to.
We're not making enough babies to replace our population. Right. We have room for immigrants.
Right. My question is how to convince, the people that should know better. I keep harping on Trumpism. I don't know what the solution is. Social media. Maybe more left-wing media need to, send out message on point, reinforce, each other with the politicians within the Democratic Party. Again, I'm Canadian. I kind of consider myself independent. I've voted both for the left-leaning and the right-leaning parties here. Try to figure out the best. But you guys, I just shake my head. It's like,
the Democrats have been accused justifiably of being bad and lazy and leaning back in messaging for decades. And I don't know. That is probably true, but what is more true is the Republicans have adopted super aggressive messaging. That it's one name for the model is the Russian fire hose of misinformation. based on the Russians have learned that if you bombard people with hundreds and thousands of social media messages and news outlet messages every day, you can control their thinking. And when Elon Musk bought Twitter, and now the conservative Republican MAGA messaging overwhelms. I used to go on Twitter because it used to have thousands of comedians, and I used to be able to read hundreds of jokes a day by the funniest people in America and the world. And 3 years ago, Musk bought Twitter. He made things miserable. He brought back all the a-holes who were kicked off for, writing stuff like Hitler was right and let's put the Jews in the ovens again. Those guys are all back and making it miserable for people who just want to trade jokes. And so all the people who made Twitter enjoyable left. And now it's, it's overwhelmingly MAGA. And so if you're into that stuff, if you are a MAGA, you can go on Facebook, you can go on Twitter, and you can read dozens and hundreds of messages that reinforce your beliefs every hour. And it's much harder to do that. If you 50 years ago, conservative think tanks figured out that low information voters, which is a euphemism for dumb people, are easier to manipulate. And so they developed a whole infrastructure of bombarding gullible and dumb people with endless messaging. And they love it. A lot of MAGA, not every MAGA is an idiot, but a lot of them are. And they love the flood of messages that tell them they're smart and right. And, liberals, a lot of whom aren't idiots, there are plenty of liberal idiots too, but those who aren't don't really want to spend all day, every day, absorbing hundreds and thousands of messages telling them they're right. So it's an asymmetric situation. And yeah, I agree with John. I don't know how to get out of it, at least until AI takes over and tells all of us what to think, more powerfully than humans can, because AI will have more data. And, if the San Francisco consensus is right, more brain power to figure out how to manipulate us.
Just out of curiosity, because you mentioned a couple of times, and I don't know enough about it, as I said earlier, different countries and everything. Is there a MAGA equivalent? Because I hear a lot of people from other countries, they get frustrated. You're not the only one. I've got friends from African nations and Asian nations and others that get frustrated by the MAGA influence on the U.S. And even before MAGA, there was the whole Tea Party, and there was the Jerry Falwell moral folks and everything along those lines. So there have been various forms of conservatism in the U.S. that have had their moment in the sun, for lack of a better term, and everything. But is there a Canadian version of MAGA, or is that part of y'all's frustration, is that y'all don't have anything this far to the extreme? Or is there a Canadian version of, say, the Bernie movement, which is what MAGA would say is the opposite of their movement, which is kind of like the whole AOC and Bernie Sanders? So is there similar movements that are deeply political and entrenched in their ideology in Canada? Or is that part of the frustration? Is it y'all sitting there going like, what are you Americans doing?
We saw that during Freedom Convoy. I don't know if you remember that during COVID, where a number of from the West, I guess, truckers came and it basically shut down Ottawa, or capital, for a number of weeks. So definitely there's a component of MAGA that has seeped. It is by no means anywhere close, percentage-wise, to you guys. Even the conservatives, when Trump started talking about 51st state, Carney basically became prime minister basically on that one issue, because even the conservatives here didn't like that. Now, a certain percentage bought that as well, wants to be 51st, but most, as we saw with Carney's win, no, we don't.
So states, those countries that have Fox News or other, Rupert Murdoch is maybe the most pernicious influence of the last 100 years. He's 94 years old. He owns hundreds of media outlets, including Fox News and the New York Post and the Wall Street Journal. And his outlets are happy to propagandize. If you don't watch Fox News, you should tune in for 5 minutes here and there, especially during prime time. Whatever the MAGA line is, they are pushing it. Now, there are a few people at Fox who push back a little bit, but odds are at any time of the day, you're going to hear a pro-Trump message. And this guy, he's 94, frickin' Murdoch. And, people have been looking forward to maybe some change, maybe, breaking the stranglehold on MAGA brains if he passes away and his kids take over. But it looks like the kid, I think Lachlan Murdoch, who's set to take over, shares his politics with his dad. But his dad just keeps going. He's 94. He's still horny. He's still like getting married to women 30 years younger than him. He was married to a supermodel who was formerly married to Mick Jagger. In his 80s, he was married to Jerry Hall, who was the quintessential blonde supermodel. He just keeps going.
His son is, I heard, very similar. So
yeah, I mean, there are like Succession. The TV show Succession was kind of based on the Murdoch family, and there are several siblings, and some of them aren't like hyper MAGA conservative, but it looks like they're not going to be the ones who end up running Fox News.
Yeah, we don't have, thankfully, an equivalent Fox News here at all. We do have access to Fox News if you want to, via cable, but we don't. I hate to compare the intelligence of Americans with Canadians because I don't think that's fair. Again, I think it's the influence of Fox News, and it's so much the partisanship of politics down in the States. I think that contributes, that whole tribalism. There's a bit of that here in Canada, but by no means anywhere close to.
Well, there's big money in tribalism. Fox News grosses $14 billion a year. The primetime hosts on Fox make $25 to $35 million a year. Sean Hannity, maybe their biggest primetime host, he makes $35 million a year, and he buys rental properties. Sean Hannity owns at least 1,200 apartments and condos.
How do they sleep at night?
There's a mattress store ad that is running in the U.S. that is pretty funny. They show somebody doing something despicable, like using the emergency lane to cut in front of like a traffic jam, and somebody yells at them, "How do you sleep at night?" And then they cut to they go, "Very well," and then they show them at the mattress store buying this fantastic mattress.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, eventually going down that path, even the rich elite will get screwed. I mean, these bargains with the devil never end.
You can see, like most, I think a lot of people in the Trump administration are fine dealing with the devil. I think the one guy who shows the most wear and tear from moral compromises so far is Marco Rubio. There's plenty of video and photos of him looking uneasy in Oval Office meetings. And Pam Bondi looks pretty torn up, but that's probably just because she's 58 years old and she's blonde and she's from Florida, and that's probably not feeling the weight of moral compromise. It's probably just sun damage.
History will not be kind to these people.
Yeah, if MAGA isn't in charge of history.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
that's the other thing.
I have no doubt. I'm a belligerent optimist.
Okay.
This too will end.
Well, one of the things that people talk about all the time, John, I don't know how it is in Canada, even though I do have some relatives, some cousins that live there in Canada and everything like that. But one of the things that people oftentimes talk about is this notion that if it bleeds, it leads. I know that even Nick and Kim are joking about that and everything. So that's the other thing, in addition to tribalism, is there's a lot of coverage of negative news and not so much the positive news. And I mean, as one that was trained in journalism, I know that that is a real thing, because a lot of times if you turn on the news, it's going to be the latest fire, the latest murder, the latest whatever that is if it bleeds, it leads kind of attitude. So I just wondering, is there less of that in the Canadian news media? Like if you turn on your daily 6 o'clock news, is there a lot of news both about politics and about upbeat things and positive things, or is there a lot of that negative news coverage that we get? And I don't care whether it's local or regional coverage. There's a lot of that coverage that goes to the front of the line. And are you thinking that that's less of a case in Canada? And like I said, I've got some relatives there, but I haven't been there enough to.
It's there. If it bleeds, it leads. It's here as well. We have newspapers that are, right leaning, not MAGA, fully on, but pretty conservative with a spin towards kind of right wing conservative point of view. And I hear that. I have some friends, and we can have nice conversations. Nobody gets, we don't shoot each other. But I just, I'm a numbers guy, so IT. I just go on, and look at the stats. So for example, in Toronto, where I live, I hear from a few conservatives, oh, downtown is bad, full of guns. And we have a Toronto Police Board. They have a website. The numbers are all there. Crime in downtown Toronto has been going down for the last it kind of, but the trend, it goes down. And I just say, go to this website. What you're saying is just isn't true. Stop reading.
You said you're a numbers guy. It would be better for everybody if everybody were a numbers guy. So local news just presents things that happen, and there's little analysis. For instance, in LA, we don't have enough cops. You saw that LA was kind of understaffed for firefighters and resources when Malibu and part of Altadena burned down. But it's kind of similar with cops, and that leads cops to have a paramilitary structure in LA, and might lead to cops being, more violent and more ready to shoot people than if they were more adequately staffed. I think New York City has 4 times as many cops per capita as LA. Now, New York City is a different, it's a walking city. So you see cops walking around in New York City, but cops are in cars or on motorcycles here. So they can cover more territory, but they also feel more alone because Manhattan is 24 square miles. The city of LA is 400 square miles. So it feels more like the Alamo. And
what I find with people when I have these types of conversation is when I present them with facts and stats, it doesn't seem to matter. Like it's really, and maybe all I can do is introduce a seed of doubt, but for the most part, facts, stats, numbers, logic. If you're in that ideology, sort of right wing, and left wing as well. But today, and since Trumpism, it's far more prevalent on the right, where it's no comparison from where I sit.
Yeah, and it's due to more effective messaging, and also networking, where you mentioned historically that there have always been conservative, creepy, ultra right wing movements that had their day in the sun, except that they didn't have their day in the sun because the way they had to message was denied them sunlight. The John Birch Society was an ultra right wing association, probably from the 40s through the 70s, and if they wanted to message people, they had to do it through the U.S. mail, or they had to make long distance phone calls, I guess, if they wanted to get together. But long distance phone calls back then, it cost money to dial outside of your town. So it might be $1 a minute back at a time when, the average wage was $4 an hour. So there wasn't a lot of telephoning. It was U.S. mail. I guess you could take out ads in newspapers, but it wasn't. But again, all the ways you could try to make people share your crazy beliefs were limited because but now messaging is unlimited.
When Trumpism first kind of came up, I wanted to know why. So I read the history of the GOP, like you mentioned.
The Tea Party and stuff like that.
Well, even before that, the John Birch, even right wing radio, Rush Limbaugh, etc. So there's a long history. A lot of, even back then, conspiracy theorists and theories, communist red baiting. So it's always been in there. But like you say, now it's a much more targeted way of communicating, and kind of sucks in a lot of people. So I understand it. Like, I understand why it's a little bit disconcerting, and it's, from where I'm sitting, how best to combat that. Because there's, I can kind of write off the idiots, but it's hard to write off the smart ones who should know better.
Yeah.
But it's hard to get libs and independents to sit still for the barrage of messaging. So the equivalent of Limbaugh was on for 3 and 4 hours a day in the morning, and his fans would listen to the whole thing. I would listen to it sometimes, and it's a lot of it's repetitive, and a lot of it is lame because you can't be brilliant for 4 hours at a time. And so the equivalent of Limbaugh on the left was Howard Stern, who was on 4 hours a day. Subversive, funny, a lot of sexual content. But again, eventually annoying to listen to, because to take up 4 hours, you got to be repetitive. You can't, not everything can be brilliant. And certainly people who are tuning in to hear Howard Stern, persuade, a woman to get naked and get on a dildo machine, they don't want 2 hours of political messaging. They want boobs. So it's tough. The libs tried to do a liberal radio station along the lines of Limbaugh called Air America. That's what gave us Rachel Maddow. She started her broadcasting career there, but they couldn't. Senator Al Franken, before he was a senator, he was on there, but they couldn't survive financially. They couldn't get enough listeners to keep going.
I put up on the chat a book I read a number of years ago to help me understand, by Jen Senko. Fantastic book, where basically her dad, through listening to Rush Limbaugh, brainwashed, like total. He was a liberal. He turned within a number of months. He turned into a.
And if you're starting to lose it a little bit, all of us here are at least a certain age, but I think we're all sharp here. But it's like, add another 10 years to to our age. We might start to lose it. For instance, elder fraud in the U.S. is a $6 billion a year industry because older people don't have, a lot of them don't have the mental sharpness that they used to. They're easier to persuade to do stuff. And Fox News and a lot of right-wing, media are set up with bright colors, simple messages, good-looking women, big, blocky-headed men who look, all American. And their messaging is super effective.
Yep, it's
I
definitely
think we're
effective, no doubt about
preaching
that.
I'm not sure about Mark, but we're kind of on the same page.
Yeah, well, I'm definitely liberal to moderate, then more liberal than moderate. Been involved in civil rights stuff for a number of years, but get ready to wrap up and everything along those lines. I'm actually going to pull everybody off and do the 30-second countdown because I think I was on the wrong folder and everything like that. But we're going to wrap up and we'll have another World Politics on Thursday.
The 30-second countdown is. So the 30-second countdown is helpful because scientists I don't know what kind of scientists, I guess zoologists, they watched a number of different species pee, including humans, and all species seem to take right around 21 seconds to pee. So that 30-second countdown lets you go run and pee, and then you've got a couple seconds to spare.
Sounds good. So we'll let folks do that.
Just for that piece of fact, I'm glad I attended this.
Since I read about that study, I try to measure my prostate by counting while I'm peeing to see if I'm keeping up with the average.
Thanks, guys.
All right. On that note, we're ready to get on out of here. Pull both of you off and get ready to do the 30-second countdown so folks can run to the bathroom.
All right.
Bye.